Hello everyone, this is Alex, and today I'm going to show you how to change this simple melody with chords into this amazing 4-part counterpoint chorale. That's right, today we are doing some counterpoint. Now, you've probably heard me talk a few times about modal counterpoint on this channel. Well, today we are using what we learned in this theory from the 16th century into a more modern and freer approach to modes. And this is actually a melody I harmonized in a past video. So if you're looking to know more about how to harmonize a melody, well, I'll put the link to this video down in the description below. But for now, we're starting with this. So we have the simple melody with just the chord names on top. So let's start by adding a second line and then adding in the chords. There they are. Now we have our chords and our melody. And note that when we chose our chord in the other video, we already planned the bass line, which means what inversion of the chord we were using. So we have three information here: the melody first, the chords, and the bass line. So we basically have information on two lines now in our 4-part counterpoint: the bass line and the melody. So this means that in this 4-part exercise, we'll have to work a lot more on the intermediary lines. So now let's add in our two other lines, and we'll try and split all the black notes between these two lines. The only notes that we're not going to include are the notes from the 7 chords that we have that are already presented in the main melody. So let's transform this into a 4-part composition. So here we have our 4 parts, and like I said, the bottom 3 lines are plainly the chords that are presented before, but the notes are separated throughout the 3 lower staves. Now in this video, I'll be referring to the lines as soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. So like I said earlier, we already put a lot of work into deciding our bass line, and since it's pretty much a conjunct line with chromatism for 5 consecutive notes, I'm not sure I want to do much to it. The one thing that I would do is to add just a simple passage note here. Notice the passage note is not part of the C7 chord. This means that this note is going to add in some dissonance to the chord. Now this is something we have to be careful of when we choose the notes for our 2 intermediary lines, because we don't want to add dissonance over dissonance. So we want to make sure when we add a new note, a note that is dissonant to the chord, we want to try and smoothen it. We want to use it to add some tension to the harmonic discourse, but we also need to consider that if we add in too much, they might make the harmonic progression feel a little bit too strange. So we'll keep that in mind when we'll do the intermediary line on that specific bar. Sometimes I like to start with the endings, and I will start with the alto line. When I see this little movement in the soprano line, it's interesting to add a response to this line a bar later. So I will try and do it in the alto line. So we have our G here. I will try to do something similar. So I've changed this passage. Again, these two notes here are not from the C7 chord. So again, they bring some tension to the harmonic discourse. Let's see what they do with the other lines. The alto and the tenor lines here go from a third to a second here, back to a third. So they just add a little tension, a little friction in the sound that is resolved back onto the third. But notice that when they introduce the G in the alto line here, the bass line goes down to the A. So between the alto and the tenor line here, we go from a 7th to an octave. And then we have a resolution on the 10th. The fact that these goes into opposite directions make the 7th here feel okay. And the fact that at the 4th beat we have A, E, A, and C, which is actually an A minor chord. But this A minor chord is presented through dissonant notes. And that's what dissonance is all about. But note that in modal counterpoint, we are really in C7 chord throughout the whole bar. So don't try to jump from the A chord, even though we hear an A minor chord at this point. Now to the next bar, we added in this B flat here. So instead of the B flat, I will change this one to the F, because we didn't have the F from the G minor 7 yet. And now since we have an F and a B at the next bar, I kind of see an opportunity here. We had this line here, repeated here. We could repeat it here. This creates a lot of energy leading towards the ending chord. Now that we've planned our ending, let's try and work on the beginning. I already see some problem at the 2nd bar and the 3rd bars. I feel the soprano and the alto lines are a little bit too far apart. It's possible to do something like this, but it creates a much darker, lower register. And since we have so much going on in the harmonic progression, I think it would be easier to hear with closer notes at the top. So let's try and change this note to a F sharp, this one to a B flat, creating a fifth, and this one to a B natural, creating a fourth. Now the problem with this movement from the second to the third bar is that we have a direct fifth. Two line that jumps onto a fifth or an octave also gives a kind of a raw sound that is usually very noticeable in modal writing and in tonal writing. Although some modern and contemporary composers use them a lot, if you want to create some smoother effects, then you should avoid them. I will then try and do this. This is better because at the end of the second bar, we approach the fifth in opposite directions, from the second to the fifth. And note that I added the seventh here. So then this will be changed to a D7 chord. Notice also that I'm doing some jumps here. Jumps should generally be done from and to notes from the chord. And that's something that a lot of people don't get when trying to write counterpoint lines. Skips in your line will attract the ear of the listeners. So if you're jumping from a note that is not from the chord, we will think that we're suddenly in another harmony. Now from the B flat to the B natural, we could add in a similar rhythm to really exploit the chromatism. Notice that the A at the alto line adds a 6 in relation with the soprano line. It adds an 11th with the tenor and the bass line. Now for the fourth bar in the alto voice, let's try and keep this rhythm going. With B, C, and B, we're introducing a new note here that is actually in relation with the third with the soprano line. Now I'm starting to see some problems with the tenor line. There's kind of a big gap between the alto and the tenor line now. So I want to bring these two notes a little bit higher. On the third bar, we don't have a D, so I'll bring that note a little bit higher to the D. So on the fourth bar on the tenor line, we can put the E here. Now, an interesting way for the third bar to add in some movement would be to add in a little neighboring tone on the C. And we even could add in a C sharp here to really announce all the chromatism that we're starting to realize is happening at the third bar. And now at my tenor line versus my soprano line, I'm seeing a problem because the E at the fourth bar are both leading to a C. So that's a parallel octave. Parallel octaves in most music are considered doublings, but in this kind of music where there's 4 parts that needs to be independent of each other, well, we should be looking for other options. Now I see the alto who has an E here, so I kind of want to steal it for my tenor line. So I put in an E here, and now let's make a really long E. This is going to create a lot of tension, and it's all going to lead to this response with the G-7, leading to the end of the segment. Now let's get back to my alto line. Now coming from the B here, I kind of want this line to go onto the A. Since we have this going down in the alto line, and we have the G sharp A on the bass line, this creates an opposite movement onto an octave. Now I'm singing my tenor line here, and that might just be a little something that I could add. So here we have the soprano line, we have C, B, and C. So let's try and harmonize this with the E, which would create a 10th, like so. So this still allows us to have this E that's maintained for 3 bars as a main note, but we just add in some movement. And note that we really keep the F for this bar here, which is actually the resolution up from the E that was very persistent for 3 bars. Finally, for the beginning, let's look at this second bar with the tenor line, going to the F sharp here of the alto line, and then back down to the E for 2 beats. Gives a nice emphasis on the E, which is not the note from the chord, but creates some interesting tensions with the alto. We have a 4th here, and then a 6th. Of course, here with the F sharp at the bottom, we have a 7th, and then another 7th with the soprano line. Now in my alto line here, I see a problem with the C and the F sharp because we have E and F sharp at the bass line. So this is a direct octave. If I play it to you, it's not good. And the problem might just be the presence of the 7th. Maybe we don't need the 7th here. So let's change this one for a B flat, going up onto a G. We're replacing the G from the soprano line that is going onto the B flat here. So we have a 3rd that resolve into a 6th. So then instead of the B flat here, I would suggest doing a cross by presenting the E here and then exchanging notes again with introducing the B flat here and going down into the A. So now let's listen to the whole thing. So there you go, you see that it's not quite a straightforward process. When thinking of multiple lines, there are just so many implications. It's like you introduce different characters to a story, but then you're introducing a new character which has some impact on the space you're going to leave to this other character that you've planned a lot of space for it. So then you have to adapt and to adjust. So really, I'd say my number one tip when you're trying to make multiple voices sound good together is to really focus on the interactions and the intervals between the notes from the chords and the notes that are not from the chords. And to make sure that when you have a seventh, when you have a ninth, that you try to add in maybe a third or a sixth to smoothen them. Now I'm so happy with this 4-part music, I want to do a string version of it. So let's do it in this next video.